Surprisingly, one of the biggest challenges oftentimes is actually knowing where everything is. And that sounds ridiculous to some extent, right? If we put our consumer hats on, of all of us, in terms of all the different, technologies, apps, and services that we use. But the reality is, many companies might know where, major data warehouses and what kind of consumer or employee data is stored there. But the broader landscape oftentimes is a lot more complex than they think, and not always centrally managed such that people have that lens in view, and are able to keep up with all the different kind of services and technology, in addition to historic ones. So actually being able to look into your enterprise and truly enterprise wide and know where everything is and how it's managed, and to keep up to date with that, especially with the basics of, are we retaining what it is that we need to retain, either because of the legal, regulatory, or business need? And are we normal course of business getting rid of the unnecessary information, which is only costing us money and increasing our risk? Those foundational things companies continue to struggle with, and are, I'll say, chipping away at still.
I would say it's a huge effort for companies now. The ability to also be responsive in the privacy context to data subject requests for access, for requests for deletion, for requests for correction, which is happening in Europe and now in California, to be able to find that data. And if you make a decision to delete it, is it going to be populated in some other part of the company that you're not aware of? That ability to understand the lineage and the quality and where it's stored is just so essential to making this all work. And the challenge of having to have sometimes really dated systems that don't have age off capabilities, much less data element purge capabilities. I mean, it really has become such a high level executive part of the company discussion, data governance, information governance, where it really wasn't before. I would add that one of the challenges now is also escalating it to that enterprise risk management discussion. While it was cybersecurity, and a few folks would hold GDPR or some privacy requirement as a significant enterprise risk, really it's just a growing area. Even just having to keep up with politics and data localization requirements and where the data is flowing inside and outside the United States has become a real significant issue for companies. And that just feeds into a strong information governance.
I think we're hearing from a number of our clients that, frankly, it has been hard to find the right folks and skill sets. But I would say that, folks in the industry, this is a great opportunity, to think through your teams. But I would say it's a mix, right? You have a number of folks that are very knowledgeable about data governance and technology, folks that understand how systems work and how data, metadata, and data artifacts and systems work, what is retained, what isn't, whatnot. And that's not necessarily one discipline, but a number of folks that either come from a digital forensics background or a data science, data analytics background and such, that kind of understand that. I'd also say there's a number of folks with, I would say, legal background that come into play, because understanding the legal implications and the arguments, but bridging that gap to the technology, I think, is absolutely critical. And again, companies are struggling with that right now. Jocelyn, I'm not sure what you've seen, because I know it's a mix.
I would say the same. I also have to say I have privacy engineers and data scientists on my team as well. I think they add significant value as we're trying to think through how to embed some of our requirements into products, and as we design and think about the leveraging governance tools. I really spend a lot of my time trying to upskill my legal team on engineering and more analytical capabilities, and spending a lot of time with my analytics parts of my team and my data scientists, teaching them about regulatory requirements and why laws are written the way they are. And that translation that Jane mentioned is so essential, because it really does help when you have a team bringing all of these different skills together. it ends up making things so much easier to troubleshoot and also to come up with really creative ways to solve problems. So it's a constant learning environment for everybody, I think.
I would say it highlights the need for companies to have sort of a diverse set of skill sets as part of your program execution team, right? Whether it's one person that has multi-dimensional skill sets or a number of folks, but to have that mix of the legal, the regulatory, the privacy mindset, as well as the protection and the execution piece, understanding systems and data and solutioning and architecture, knowing how that all works together, I think is absolutely critical.
And I would add, Jane, that part of it is bringing that skill to be aware that you're missing something. Sometimes it's not that you are on the side the engineer as well, but that you realize you need an engineer to be looped into the conversation. My biggest success is when someone reaches out to me and they said, I know that there's a privacy issue. I'm not exactly sure what it is. Or I know that there's a data governance concern here, but like I'm bringing people to the table to have a conversation about it. So part of it is just enough of an awareness to know where there are gaps and who else should be sitting at the table with you.
Start with what will sound self-serving, but is absolutely true, is you need sometimes an outside-in lens, right? So whether you leverage consultants like ourselves or even an internal audit group or some other sort of group that can have an outside-in lens in terms of how the program operates in a normal course of business, how you adjust when a new regulation pops up, and how do you ensure that you are compliant where you need to be, how you think about e-discovery and legal holds, and can those be robust enough in your broader landscape, how you think about your third parties, and especially your riskiest third parties that may have access or using your data, and how do you feel comfortable that they are when the stakes are higher than they've ever been. And I think that sort of lens to be able to step back and do a much more, I'll say, regular cadence of an assessment is important. Businesses are changing and evolving faster than ever. And the only way to keep up is to constantly be kind of looking at it from different lens to be able to understand, okay, where are our risks and where are our gaps?
I would add that I work with one company that does something very creative where they meet with a different part of the business, and they do this on a quarterly basis, and they problem solve issues, especially with the part of the business that they don't usually have the conversation with, to see how where they could leverage new insights. But it is that looking back every quarter to how it's working and what's not working, and troubleshooting, like despite the fact that you're dealing with crisis after crisis in your BAU activities, it's always trying to think through that longer term roadmap of not being in a reactionary mode every time there's a massive legal hold or there is a new retention requirement in one country, and how does that, to have to stop everything to deal with a crisis by crisis is just, it just takes up so much energy. And so really it's that taking that next step to commit as an organization that this is just part of business now, that it's part of business to have everything connected and working together. It's part of business to another law is not it's not going to be like the stopping everything as a project. But it's a commitment. It really is, because it's an expense in the beginning to get it to a BAU, and then it is a commitment to always be looking at it. How do you refine it, make it more efficient, make sure that things are working right? So the actionable part of it is getting that senior level buy-off, that a buy-in, that it is it's not going away, and that it's always going to become data is just never going to become a problem that you can solve in one cycle. So,
building off that comment, especially the senior level buy-in, which is absolutely critical for them to understand, trying to get the different senior executive stakeholders at the same table to have a conversation, I think is incredibly valuable. So as we talked about before, a little bit of this trust balance, or at least, what's the right balance of managing your risks and the opportunities, the risk and the reward of the data, it is actually talking through some of the elements. And, a term I like to use is information governance by design. So folks are probably familiar with privacy by design. And then several years ago, people talked about cybersecurity by design. I like to say information governance by design, which means if you're getting into a new business, if you're developing a new product, whatever that sort of new item is, are you considering how the data is retained and disposed and managed and in compliance with all of those sort of risk lens while you're building it, such that you don't end up later on with a remediation activity of having to look back and saying, oh, we need to correct this, we need to change this, we need to fix this, right? And having that mindset from the start, I think, is just better for all of your stakeholders and for an efficient exercise to begin with. But again, it gets it in folks' mindset that we always need to be thinking about how are we managing and controlling the data appropriately.